Adisadel College is not the only school in Cape Coast that has vowed to reduce their intake of first-year students in the 2017-2018 academic year. Ghana National College, Academy of Christ the King, Wesley Girls High Schools have all gone the same way. Schools that have begun complaining are facing critical infrastructure challenges that are threatening quality. At Academy of Christ the King, for instance, teaching and learning take place under canopies and classes have to end if it rains or the scorching sun is unbearable. It is in the light of this that the headmaster of Adisadel College, William Kusiyeboa, says the stakeholders of the school, as a way of maintaining their enviable academic prowess, won't sacrifice quantity for the quality they have fought for over the years.
The decision by stakeholders of Adisadel College to revise downwards the intake of SHS 1 students effective the 2016-2017 academic year due to inadequate accommodation facilities, coupled with the dissolution of one temporary house, New House 1, reduced the intake from 920 students in the 2015-2016 academic year to 423 for the 2016-2017 academic year, a percentage reduction of 54. It must be mentioned that the document by stakeholders on admissions served as the guide for the 2016-2017 SHS 1 admissions and shall remain so for the years ahead till accommodation facilities in our college improve. This goes to explain the earlier decision by stakeholders. In 2017, if the accommodation facilities remain unchanged, another temporary house, New House 2, will be dissolved to claim back those classrooms for use as such.
Despite these infrastructural challenges, Minister for Works and Housing, Samuel Atachia, an old boy and guest speaker of the ceremony, says President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo has a very good reason for implementing the free senior high school policy in Ghana this year, despite the meager resources.
It is really that ship that turns on the light in the darkness of the nation and directs that the human capital and human development should top every priority list. Accordingly, within our meager resources, senior high school, according to the vision of President Akufo-Addo, be free and open to all. After all, it is the educated mind at every level that will ultimately drive GDP upwards.
Works and Housing Minister Samuel Atachia commissioned a dining hall that was remodeled and constructed by the 1992 year group. Richard Kojonyakon, Joy News, Cape Coast.
Okay, so this begins our conversation really. Just that speech delivered at the speech and prize giving day by the headmaster of the Adisadel College triggers a bigger conversation, a conversation of the schools cannot adequately take care of the numbers that are coming through to them, to the extent that some of them, this is not even a threat any longer. This is what they're going to do. They're just going to cut down and only accommodate
and
what
I
they
believe
can.
this man is saying it because he's the headmaster of Adisadel. I don't know what will happen to the Class B schools, whether they can, because they too taking a lot more of students. But I think the conversation also is a wider problem. And
apparently, at least for some of the top schools in Cape Coast, yes, this is a big problem, and this is a decision that they've apparently made. We don't know if this is legal or not, but if they can't take more, why do you give them more? Let's just involve the Executive Director of the Institute for Education Studies, Dr. Prince Amar, in this conversation. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you, and thanks for joining us.
Many thanks for the opportunity as well.
And later on, we will speak to the Public Relations Officer of the Ghana Education Service as well, Reverend Bette, will speak to us via phone on this subject. But maybe, I guess, appropriately, we can ask how widespread this issue of numbers and intake of some of the senior high schools, how widespread is this?
Well, I'm not too sure which schools have indicated their intention not to take up to their capacity or probably take more than expected. But what I do know is that some of the schools are oversubscribed. You know, if you
already?
Yes.
Even before we have free SHS?
Yes. I mean, people would want to choose Infantipim, Adisadel, the top set schools, and so they are almost always oversubscribed and as against other schools that could take, more students. There are some schools that have very little students or admission there, and so as a matter of rationing, the student intake across the other schools, because if all attention is on the top schools, then likely they will be enrolling more than they expected to enroll. I think that informed the policy decision of the Kufuor administration on these model schools, so that you can ease the pressure on the acclaimed top schools. So as we speak now, there are quite a number of schools who are classified as grade A schools, well-known, classified as top set schools, who are likely to reduce intake because the facilities are not there. And I should think that the Ghana Education Service is aware of that, and they will acknowledge and find a way of dealing with the situation.
Just, the talking points as the headmaster of Adisadel made the comments over the weekend was, so why didn't we just invest in expanding, knowing that people will definitely choose Adisco or any of the other top ones in Cape Coast, for instance, instead of investing in the day senior high school?
That's, why I'm smiling, because that was the argument that I raised, for the last 2 years on the community day school concept, because people will want to go to well-established schools.
So why don't you expand?
So why don't we expand that instead of setting up maybe a school at Kwabenya or Professor Mo's hometown? What's the name? Otuam. So that should have been our focus, or could have reduced the number of schools that we are constructing, and then expand existing ones so they can take more. Because as we speak now, the facilities in some of these schools and the pressure on them to admit more are not consistent. And so there has to be a way right now, as we go forward in respect of the free SHS policy, there has to be a way of rationing or redistributing the schools across. In any case, the schools will declare vacancies. Admission of students is based on declaration of vacancies by the schools. So the schools will declare vacancies, how many students they want to take in the year.
Oh, so the schools have total control over that. They can say, we only have room for 20 people, so those are the people that we're admitting.
Exactly.
And so government can't do anything.
Not at all. So what they do is that they write, GES send a letter to them, asking them to declare vacancies available for this academic year, and based on that, students are placed. Now, let's look at the figures for 2016. 516,000 plus schools were declared vacancies. What it means is that the schools, senior high schools, vocational technical institutes across the country declared that they could admit up to 516,000.
Okay.
Now, students who wrote the BEC last year were up to 461,000.
Yeah. So that's less.
Less. So last year, and unless we have evidence to falsify, because I cannot falsify the figures because I have no other means of using the ones that they have been produced. So unless the figures are not true, then we can say that there are adequate facilities to admit the students.
But that's if you are doing fair distribution.
Yes, so that's the argument, because as we speak now, last year, 95%, according to the Ghana Education Service, of students who wrote the BEC were placed, and they ran up to 437,000. Now, assuming all the 461,000 students were placed, there will still be surplus vacancies available. Now, let's take the figures for 2017, likely. If you look at the trend of increase in BEC candidates from 2011 up to 2016, the maximum you can get is around 33,000. The average is 15,000 increase in student enrollment, BEC candidature. So for that reason, assuming that we are even adding 10% of 2016 figure of 461,000. We are running around 502,000
which is still less.
Students, which is still less. So the issue is not, I suspect that the government, based on these figures, to not to show or commitment or demonstrate some interest in expansion of infrastructure. Because if you look at the budget, very limited allocation have been made
for infrastructure. So it means that the SHS schools that were started by the Mahama administration,
yes,
will not entirely see completion in many of those areas. Those that have not started, I'm sure, will not even see the light of day at all.
Well, I should think so. For this year, yes.
Based on
the figures available, there is no going to be completion or continuation of the community day schools, except the 23 schools, the community day schools funded by the World Bank. Since 23 of them is being funded by the World Bank, and money is already available for that. 10 of those schools have been completed, so 13 of them, because monies are available, they are not under the jurisdiction of government in terms of funding, so they will continue. But largely, the remaining ones, there are no allocation for them, so we are not seeing any expanded infrastructure. But I should think that if the figures that have been provided is correct, then and granted that we have 10% increment or in enrollment, then we're still able to place our students. But the point will be the pressure on, the.
Why do we have that pressure?
It's an issue of disparity in quality.
What was that issue of disparity?
See, some schools have access, a lot of infrastructure, quality input, good libraries, and the rest compared to others. And so, and they have good track record. And parents want to send their kids to schools that can perform well. If you look at the number of private schools coming up, they are increasing quite astronomically. And a lot of these private schools are producing the top set of students in this country. And these students find themselves in the top set of schools. So as the top set of private schools students increases, there is high demand for top set schools, like the Infantipums, like the Wesley Girls, like the Adisadels and the Reds. And that's what is going to happen. So what we need to do is to look at the other ones that has very limited quality input, like textbooks, like poor infrastructure, some of them very dilapidated buildings, some of them don't have basic teaching and learning materials. Provide adequate funding for such schools so that we can relieve.
So you're saying that's what we had.
That's
over
what,
the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
We've had a school in the Bonafu region, and I believe I think 2 or 3 of their students won awards the last time. The whole of West Africa.
One person got the overall.
Is it the
best.
St. James Seminary or something like
yes.
that? And they do. I think they are almost in the first 5 brackets of doing schools that do well in the WASI. If we have schools like that, what makes them do well relatively in that corner of the country in which they are, when they are not supposedly among the top ranked schools, but have students, well, per ratio of the students they present and per ratio of the students that the other schools present tend to do well, averagely?
Well, I have not looked at the demographic background of students going there, but in most cases, in the top set schools, schools who are doing well, the students are coming from very good private schools. That's a very important thing. Those coming from public schools are getting aggregate. The best you can get in a school, in a public school, maybe aggregate 14, 15, and they will not qualify for Adisadel. So, but what happened is that it does not mean that the student who has got aggregate 14 cannot progress, cannot do well. It is because of facilities in the basic schools. Some of these students have had opportunity to go to secondary school and have done well. Andam, Professor Andam, initiated a policy in tech where people from very poor senior high school background, schools that were not classified as a top set, he gave them some percentage. So even if you got aggregate 20,
so
and you came from some maybe some school, I don't want to mention a name, but some senior high school that are not doing well, he will give you admission, and that cohort,
despite your grades.
No, but because
yes.
it doesn't mean you failed.
Yes.
It just means that
there are cut-off points.
The competition
yes.
is really you know on.
There are cut-off points. So at least even if you exceed the cut-off point, but you qualify.
Yes, the WAEC says that A1 to C6 as the cut-off point is a pass. All right, but what happens is, especially for the schools, that's what the universities have said. However, because of the high number of students, did I say A1? Yes, secondary school. Because of high number of students doing well, you end up taking top sets, A1, B2, A1, B2. So he lowered it for these people. That cohort of students, a lot of them got first class.
Wow.
See, so in all over the world, especially in the advanced countries, policy interventions are developed to address what we call achievement gaps, because there are quite an extensive body of knowledge indicating or suggesting that people's background, family background, has significant effect on learning outcome and achievement. What it means is that people coming from low background, low income families, a poor family, tend to do very poorly in schools than those from affluent backgrounds.
You mean in basic school?
In school in general. So if you are taking education as a tool to bridge the poverty and the rich gap, then you need to address this disparity and to be able to provide support for people from the low performing background, low performing or low income background, so that they could also get access to secondary education and to universities. So our system as it works now tends to provide more support from people from relatively affluent background at the expense of those from low income background. And that's an area that the SDG 4 attempts to focus, providing equitable access to education for all, regardless of family background.
So you're saying that we're implementing all this, free SHS, and then there are also cut-off points, etc., without looking at those disparities.
Exactly. I mean, if you look at the data available sitting at the Ministry of Education, the top 20% of schools in Ghana, in secondary schools in Ghana, produce 46% of admission in the universities, the top 20%. The bottom 20%, I mean, they are made up of about 106 schools or so. They produce only 8% of students.
108 schools?
Yes.
And they provide only
8% of students in the universities. And this bottom, find out where the schools are coming from. They are coming from the villages. So what it means is that the people from low background are not getting access. And that's why policy interventions always needs to base on addressing the inequity.
But that's not because they are not smart enough.
Not at all. The issue of smartness are dependent on several environmental factors. We call them in the ecosystem. See, so where there are support, parental support, they are likely to do well. People whose parents have good background, education background, tends to do well in school. So we call it parental involvement has effect on learning outcome. So there are complex issues that goes in there. There are some students who are what we call low ability learners. What it means is that they are good, but it takes time for them to understand concept, assimilate and accommodate new concept. Now, our form of teaching in schools are what we call one size fits all, whole class teaching. What it means is that if a teacher finishes a lesson and asks, do you understand? And some people say yes, the teacher moves on. So to a large extent, the people who are unable to compete with others who are good in class academically, they are always left behind. Unlike other systems where we call differentiated learning are developed, for which reason people have been classified into low ability, average and high ability, And those who have low ability or classified under low ability are provided specific interventions in schools to support them and bring them up.
Now, in this time then, we're having an across-board implementation of free SHS. How is our lack of addressing some of these problems going to affect the subject of quality and then the excellence of the students at the end of the day, and perhaps overall teaching and learning?
So we can look at, place our context to what is happening elsewhere, and then we'll come back. So we look at Kenya. Kenya is the first country in sub-Saharan Africa to implement free SHS. Now, there are schools, they have some schools, and they call those schools youth schools, universal secondary education. So we have some schools providing that service. The evidence available suggests that parents are moving their kids from the youth schools to other private schools because quality has been adulterated. If you look
is it because of the free?
Yes, it's because of the fact that monies that probably would have been used to invest into the system are going into that free policy, and which means that there's
feeding
and the rest, and which means that there are very limited resources to look at the quality indicators, textbooks,
or even pay teachers well for them ratio, to be committed,
paying teachers well, and the rest. So there has been much concern. I think Uganda was the first, Kenya the second in 2008, and they also have problems with it. I think Tanzania started theirs again. The whole idea is that I have just given you an example. If you take the BEC results, I will just take some figures. Northern region is doing 22% of people who pass to go to senior high school. Upper East and Upper West region are doing 11%. What it means is that if you take 100 students in Upper East region, only 11% get the qualifying grades to go to senior high school. The rest of them don't have the opportunity to proceed. Again, if you look at results, the people in those backgrounds, those areas are not doing well. So what we need to do is to go along the one being funded by the World Bank. It's called the Ghana Secondary Education Improvement Program.
The 23?
Yeah, the 23 secondary schools are part of the whole project.
Okay.
But it goes beyond building 23 schools. It goes into looking at quality and equity issues.
So those are also, in a way, like model schools? Are they going to be like model schools? With all
the 23 schools were developed and modeled in the same way as the E-Block.
Okay.
So they come in the same form. But that project looks at access and equity. The access in the sense that there are, for example, 10 districts in Ghana which did not have secondary schools at all. So in terms of addressing access issue, they decided to build 10 schools in those 10 districts so that people in those districts can have access. Okay, but the quality issue is that they identified 125 schools in Ghana that are low performing, and they're providing specific intervention for them. And then they also looked at students who are unable to go to secondary school based on affordability, and then provided funding for Comfort also to administer scholarship for them. So what we needed to do is probably do the targeting, need-based assessment. I mean, the government intends to improve the welfare of people. The government intends to initiate policies and implement policies that will improve the life chances of our people economically. So if we are going to improve our economic status, how do we provide the free SHS in that context? So as things go on and as we begin to improve our economic welfare, do we still have to provide,
So you're saying that for the top schools, then would it be, those students who go there usually are from perhaps homes that could afford, and so we needn't spread free SHS fully to those schools, but rather concentrate on the schools or the areas where perhaps the bulk of the students who, based on statistics, go there are said not to come from affluent school, affluent homes or can afford. Is that what you're saying?
The point is that's exactly the point. I mean, somebody look at the Ghana Living Standard Survey 6, and you find that the huge disparity in income across the district. So if you have a parent taking maybe 10,000 cedis a month, and another parent roughly taking 1,000 cedis a month, or maybe 400 a month, and you are paying providing free SHS for both parents, absolutely difficult for these parents. So the issue is about addressing disparities in the system. We have done that in different levels. At JHS, we found out that at the basic school, we found out that there are some fees that parents can't afford. So we decided to provide capitation grant. We are doing school feeding program because some children, their parents cannot afford to give them food. So we decided to provide school feeding for those specific
so you're saying
not all of
it. But not to just broaden the thing and overburden.
Exactly. And what is even of concern is the fact that parents have a responsibility of providing food, shelter, and clothing for their kids. These responsibilities need not to be taken from parents, and this is what.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for passing through.
But just before you go, so the implementation of the free SHS, which begins in September, what do you think about it? Is it something that will work out?
Well, I think that at the moment, I mean, the government has declared its intention to do that. What we would need to do is to find a way of fine-tuning and then helping government to do that, because there's no going back. It has got the political mandate and commitment to do it, flowing from the last election. So I would have thought, my suggestion was that probably would have wait for next academic year and make sure that we've prepared adequately. At the moment, they seem not to be. They are preparing the implementation plan at the moment, and let's see 5 months whether we'll be able to develop that plan adequately to do that.
All right.
Are you a part of the development?
Because of time, because I was just going to say that an intervention that the Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University of Cape Coast made,
we can play that.
That has not been received rather well. So there's almost as if, okay, if you have an opinion, don't share it, because it will be like you are anti, you're coming against the policy or something of the sort. But we're grateful for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Yes, and so we're ending the conversation with this insight from the Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University of Cape Coast, Professor George Kwekodro. He's saying government must call for stakeholder inclusion in the implementation of the policy if it wants to achieve its target.
You see, as a nation, we need to acknowledge the fact that policy is different from policy implementation. Policy implementation requires strategies. It requires divergent opinions from stakeholders. And so as Minister of Education, what I expect him to do is to create a forum where all stakeholders with the divergent opinions would meet and then share ideas and prioritize strategies for implementing the free SHS. This is a laudable initiative that His Excellency, the President Nana Akufo-Addo, has actually boldly brought about. But we need strategies that will make this strategy meaningful to the Ghanaian. And the only way we can do this is through shared ideas, like those that I have mentioned, and I know others too have mentioned. So I appeal to the Minister of Education to develop an open mind, develop a listening ear, and then be able to create a forum where stakeholders will meet to discuss the implementation of this. That's the only way we can achieve quality. And I think one of the things I'm actually projecting, in my view, is the quality aspect of implementing the free SHS education. I have not in any way kicked against the implementation, but my concern is on the approaches to implementing the quality, the policy. And so I was very much surprised when the Minister of Education, in reacting to my suggestion that there's a need for the Minister of Education to sensitize stakeholders, because I strongly believe that the free SHS policy doesn't mean that stakeholders wouldn't have shared responsibilities to perform. but they must know. I also talked on the fact that there are other challenges relating to teachers. In some, particularly in the less endowed schools, where we have teachers who haven't been trained in particular subjects, teaching those subjects. For example, there are cases where biology teachers are teaching mathematics. Vernacular teachers are teaching English. These are things that need to be addressed. I also talked about the fact that there is a need to put in measures to ensure that delays in terms of remitting the schools are addressed so that we can lay a foundation for quality in implementing the SHS policy. Saying that it is hypocritical for me to have made those comments, asking whether 50 years ago, when free SHS was introduced in the country, I had advised that it should be stopped in some parts of the country. It's unfortunate because 50 years ago, I had not even started primary school education. So it was not just possible for me to have commented on that. But ever since I became an adult and experienced the importance, the value of quality education and the need to balance access expansion with quality education, I have not relented my efforts in advising governments to index free SHS with quality education. Maybe I'll have to inform you that in 2012, I made a presentation which was published in the Commonwealth Partnerships. This is a reference document for the Commonwealth Secretariat that serves as a working document for Commonwealth Education Ministers. This is there.